Good morning, everyone. We've got about 5 minutes. We'd like you to grab a seat when you could, so we can get going right at 8 o'clock. 5-minute warning, please.
It's a,
Oh. My husband, my late husband used to work for General Dynamics. He went from GE to Lockheed Martin to Montgomery Erickson. But I never could come in here. He was always telling me about his office and his view of the world. Tell me your name again. Mike, I'm Serena.
Serena, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
You see where they used to make the Gatling gun?
Yeah. Yes. He was an engineer, and I think he helped design it.
My brother works for GE now.
Oh, he does?
I don't know. He can't tell anybody what he does.
Here or
In Connecticut.
In Connecticut, yeah. I know. They can't tell anybody. I would just tell people at parties that it's got into rockets or something. Is that the speaker over there? I want to get his car.
Bunch of people talking.
Yeah. Well, it's good to see you.
Yes, I'm here.
Good morning, can we all find a seat, please? Good morning, can we all find a seat? Okay, I believe we're about to begin, so we'll get going. The mayor has arrived. Plenty of seats down front, plenty of seats in the front. Well, good morning, everyone. I am Dan Dumonet, Executive Vice President for the Hall Communications Radio Group here in Burlington. Welcome to the annual BBA Business Summit. Today's event is focused on transportation and conversation on what's the future of transportation for Burlington. So welcome to spring for the next 7.5 hours. This morning's event is made possible by our presenting sponsors, AARP Vermont and the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, and our title sponsor. Thank you to Pomerleau Real Estate and Free Press Media. Thank you to CCTV, channel 17 right there. They're recording the event today and this morning, and also broadcasting it live, so please check with cameraman and operator later to see when it will be rebroadcast. Also, you can visit cctv.org for more details. So, thank you to our host this morning, VEIC, catering from City Market and accommodations for our guests by Hotel Vermont. A quick reminder that tonight at 5:30, Citizen Cider will host an event, an extension sort of this morning's, beginning at 5:30, entitled Future of How We Move, a community conversation about transportation in Burlington. And Jeff Olson, who is our keynote speaker this morning, will be throwing back a few ciders later. Jeff, is that what we're doing? Okay, good. Along with Han Van Wees from Hotel Vermont, Chris Lyon, manager of Mission Impact at 7th Generation. It'll be a casual conversation with all. Enjoy complimentary appetizers by Citizen Cider and a cash bar. Tickets available at bbavt.org or at the door. Also, one housekeeping mention, the restrooms are through the back door there. Take a left and a right, you'll find them down that way, okay? Before we begin, we'd like to hear from our keynote speaker, Jeff Olson from Alta Planning and Design. We'll hear from Kelly Devine, Executive Director of the Burlington Business Association. Kelly.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Good morning and welcome. I want to just thank all the community leaders and members who came out this morning to join us. I think we got lucky with the weather. Sounds like the worst is coming tomorrow. This is our 15th annual business summit. I was surprised to recognize that. And every year we try to do a topic to focus on ideas and concepts that support and further the BBA mission. So for those of you who don't know, here's our mission. How does transportation and transportation choice serve the BBA mission? You can see very clearly we focus on economic vitality, but we also build it out in a bunch of different categories. I wonder if we should add transportation in there, because it is such a vital part of the discussions we need to have when we want to grow our downtown. Every time a new project comes along, the BBA tends to get involved. As folks know, we were pretty strongly involved in the redevelopment of the mall. We work a lot with Mayor Weinberger's administration to move new things forward. We also work on things like the bike path and improving City Hall Park. But specifically when you're doing downtown development or redevelopment, especially if a project includes housing, parking is the term we use that becomes part of the discussion. And every project has to have a plan. Here's the latest one. But I'm asking the question today, should we think of transportation plans rather than parking plans for our city? Here's Cambrian Rise. That's a project that's less than a mile outside of downtown. It's 900 homes, roughly, Mayor, is that correct? There's gonna be a lot of new people living there. Here's Eagles Landing. This is a Champlain College downtown student apartment project on St. Paul Street. Projects can sometimes struggle with moving forward on their, is that not it? It is, right? Moving forward with their parking plans. Eagles Landing, for example, because of the close proximity to downtown, and the number of students living there made a pledge to keep student cars out of the downtown in this project and to give public parking back to the city. Burlington City Place, as some folks may know, in addition to the over 900 parking spaces that were included with the project, through the appeal process had to add 200 more. Even though Burlington studies show that we have available parking, a lot of times this issue comes up when we're trying to redevelop our city, especially when we focus on density. So we're bringing the transportation topic to you today because we think as we look forward and we think forward, we want to be proactive about how we as a community solve these problems. And we know that parking is emotional. In 2014, when the BBA worked with the City of Burlington to try to make some improvements in parking, 7 days asked readers on social media to describe parking in Burlington in one word. I always love to look at this slide again. Here's what they came up with. Our consultant loved the fact that Sisyphean ended up on there. And it's a reflection that parking is emotional. We want convenience. Most people want, whether they live or work or coming here to visit, want to be able to find parking easily, and they want it to be close to where they're going. But parking is just one example, although it is the most common, predominantly, of how we move around in Burlington. So I'm going to do the typical audience poll. And it is January, and it's been cold and snowy out, but how many folks walked to the event today? We got 3, all right. How many of you took public transit? There's a couple. How many biked? Didn't have any hardy bikers today. How many of you drove in your own personal car? That's pretty common. We know that more than 75% of the people that come in and out of Burlington on a day-to-day basis choose to commute by car. How many people have the impression that Burlington is congested? Not too many, that's good. Most of us that talk about this a lot, if we come from major cities, we think that's nothing. I come from the Boston area, that's congestion to me. How many people think they have a hard time finding a parking space when you come downtown? I'm really happy to see that result. Really happy, because as you can see, we've been working with the City of Burlington since 2014 to create major change in our parking system. This was a Free Press article that was run, that was the cover when we started this project. So we've tried to improve the parking system to make it a little bit easier to park, but as we've been looking at parking, we've also been looking at what other options we can bring to the table so that when people want to develop downtown, they have choices. Employees have choices, and employers have choices, and people who live here have choices. We know that when more and more people live downtown, they're going to want to have walkability and access to services. And we also know that we're a community that loves to get outdoors and loves to do things. So our solution for Burlington going forward, I think, really needs to look at all of those options and all of those choices. Here's some of the things that we've done in the last couple of years, and I'm going to have my team member, Derek Wrightson, over here raise his hand. And I know Chapin was supposed to be here today, but I don't see him yet. Together, our team and their team has really worked hard to improve Burlington. Hopefully some of you have noticed some of these changes. And what's that magic number, 505? That's the number of previously only privately available parking spaces that have been opened up for public use, mainly nights and weekends. Those spaces are privately run, and we often get a lot of questions about the rates. The city doesn't set the rates for those spaces, and they tend to have different amounts that they charge, so be aware of that. And I still think that even as we look at transportation choice, driving is still going to be the predominant choice that people make. Not only for people that live downtown, for our visitors, and most of our people who live downtown will want some access to vehicles. But how has parking changed? How has transportation changed in Burlington over time? Let's take a look at Church Street over the past 150 years. Can anybody see the streetcar? Remember the famous photo of the streetcar that ran down the center of Church Street? And there's a photo somewhere. I wasn't able to find it when the city lit it on fire. Then we moved to this phase. There was actually a bus running down Church Street. I found that interesting. Then we got a little crazy and said, uh-oh, let's dig that whole thing up. The number one concern that downtown merchants had when this Church Street paving, the project to pedestrianize Church Street went in, was their businesses were going to die because people can't pull up, right, Bill? Bill Truex is looking at me knowingly. And then we did this crazy thing, and look what we got. We got an amazingly vital space with cafes, people like to walk around. It's really the heart and soul of Burlington. We took a chance, and I think it worked out pretty well. Today, technology and transportation is moving very quickly, and it's going to change how we move. How fast that comes to northern Vermont can be debated. How quickly it'll become part of our day-to-day lives can be debated. This is the latest news from GM. 2019, they're going to put these autonomous vehicles on the road. In the city of Phoenix, Google's Drives program, which is now called Waymo, is actually testing thousands of vehicles in the street grid in Phoenix, autonomous vehicles, and they have a test ride program, and you can actually, as a family, sign up and have one of those vehicles assigned to you. How will autonomous vehicles, when they come, change things in Burlington? We don't know. How will they change our trucking and transportation as well? That's always been a big part of the discussion of Burlington, is the impact on trucking and transportation. We get a lot of trucks coming into town delivering stuff. How about electric bikes? We got an electric bike over here, BED program sponsored by BED behind Kelly there, and those are going to sort of change how we move a little bit. Our bike share is in the back. Hope folks got to take a look at that. That's coming within this year. How is that going to change things? Car share is here already. And transportation is going to move quickly. So today I'm asking you to listen and think about tomorrow's Burlington and what kind of city it will be. We've been working hard to grow downtown, and we've been working hard to look at growing the grand list. We want to add more density downtown. We want to add more housing. What are all the things we need to think about from an infrastructure perspective as we begin to support those changes? And what do the people who move here, the folks who we want to attract, what do they want from Burlington? They definitely are still going to want parking on some level. But we hear increasingly, and studies show, that they also want walkability, livability, and a safe and healthy lifestyle. This is part of the reason why the city is talking about the Great Streets program. This is a graphic, and I know that this is controversial, and BBA members have concerns about it, because in some cases you replace parking with other street uses. I don't know what the answer is, but I think it's good for us to come together and have a discussion about it. Now, we also want to attract more employees downtown. We do have a semi-rural location here. I live 10 miles outside of town, and I'll tell you, when I get to my house, it's a very different place in terms of density. It's tough for me to use transportation choice where I live. So, like me, many people will continue to come downtown by car, and so will most of our visitors. So I think we need to think about the balance. Today, Burlington has over 8,000 parking spaces in our downtown. About half of them are privately owned and operated. Even at peak times, we've done studies that show that hundreds of them sit empty. We're working with DPW and collecting data on parking every month. And this slide that I zip by is our new interactive map on parkburlington.com. People come to the city, they can look here and find their parking. One of the ways to deal with and confront congestion is giving people a parking destination before they show up. We've been working with events like Discover Jazz and organizations like the Flynn and others to get this information out to people that are coming to visit. So, sum up, parking is emotional. Parking a car, coming downtown and parking a car is one form of transportation. Parking is changing rapidly with new technology, and so is transportation in general. I've asked you today to come here to discuss a topic I think is a critical piece of being able to grow the Burlington economy. What will our future look like, including what will it look like from a transportation perspective? We've invited our keynote speaker, Jeff Olson, to speak to you about that. We also have the mayor here to talk about his vision for Burlington as it moves forward. Jeff's going to tell us a little bit about what other cities are doing to address this need. I'm a big believer in change. I think that you're either changing or you're moving forward. I like this quote from John F. Kennedy. We need to embrace it. I want to thank the mayor for being here and for leading our efforts to move Burlington forward. I want to ask you to stick around today, be a part of our discussion and our panel presentation. I want you to bring your concerns, because I know they're out there, your dreams and your ideas. We need to together look forward towards the future of Burlington. And I have to end with this guy, and if anybody was at our summit last year, you may remember him. This is Horatio Nelson Jackson. He's a famous Vermonter. And I don't know if the mayor knows this or not, but right next to his house is a plaque on Summit Street dedicated to this guy. This was a guy who looked forward. He made a bet in San Francisco at a men's club for $50 that he could drive a car across the United States in less than 90 days. There were no roads at the time. It was a famous journey. He made it. That was when people were mainly still getting around by horse or foot. We're a city of risk takers. We've created amazing things together in Burlington. Thank you for coming today to help us figure out what's next.
Thank you, Kelly. For those of you, nobody raised their hand when they had trouble finding a parking spot. So my key is I go to the same spot every time. How many people do that? Seriously? I'm not going to tell you where my spot is. There are blue folders on your chairs, and in there are index cards that will ask you to write some questions down. We'll have a slide presentation coming up a little bit later on after we get together in groups. Right now, let's bring up the mayor, Mayor Merle Weinberger. Welcome.
I don't have a PowerPoint, but at the end I did want to bring back one of your slides. Is that, you gonna be able to help me do that? All right, great. All right, good morning everyone. Thanks, thank you to Kelly for including me this morning. Thank you to BBA for hosting this great event. I really look forward to this summit every year. Kelly always brings in a great speaker and makes it an interesting, thought-provoking morning, and this is going to be, she's done it again. It is great to have Jeff Olson back in Burlington. You know, I met Jeff in, I can't quite place it, maybe you can. It was in the first handful of days that I was in office, or maybe I hadn't even taken office yet. It was like I was mayor-elect, and we had a conversation about turning Burlington into an even better city for walking and biking. Jeff at the time, as I think you might hear a little bit today, feels that we're doing a lot of things right here. And you know, there were some standards that we talked about then and ways to push the envelope further. And you know, 6 years later, getting ready for this talk remind me of is just how much progress we've made on a whole range of areas. You know, a lot of times we don't too often sit with transportation as the frame. A lot of the times, as sort of Kelly was suggesting, we look at our housing policy and how transportation impacts that, or we look at walking and biking. We look at isolated elements of this overall transportation picture. I appreciate this chance to really look as a holistic system, and I hope you all leave this short talk feeling that we've come a long way in the last 6 years and optimistic about where we're headed from a transportation perspective. So let me say more about what I mean by that. I'm going to sort of break it down into the kind of different elements of transportation first. So talk about what we've been doing with respect to cars, what we've been doing with respect to walking and biking, mass transit, and then try to tie it all together. Clearly, I mean, let me just kick it off by agreeing with Kelly's kind of premise that this is an area we need to be thinking about going forward, and that certainly I buy into the idea that we must continue this conversion of these underutilized downtown spaces, the parking lots, the properties like the mall property, and there's a long list of them, as Kelly pointed out with the map from Plan BTV. We have a surprising amount of underutilized lots in our downtown that represent easy opportunities in some sense to create more jobs, create more housing in our downtown without, you know, in a way that is completely consistent, I think, with what the great majority of Burlingtonians would like to see for the future, the infill of these lots for these higher and better uses. And I think it's our key opportunity and challenge, and what the future of Burlington, as I see it, we must do that if we're going to remain what Burlington has been for 150 years. The place in Vermont where people of all backgrounds, all ages, can make a living and make a home, and that, I think, was a vision of Burlington that was at risk 6 years ago. We had essentially had a broken housing market where we had created almost no new housing for more than a dozen years. And that is a big part of what we've turned around over the last 6 years, is that market is working again. We have hundreds of homes that are currently under construction. And I think as those homes start to come online, and they're starting. We see the Grove Street project already starting to come online, the Champlain College, Brown's Eagles Landing project will be online by this fall, and I think you will start to see some positive movement in the pressure on the housing market as those come online. So this metric that we've got, probably everyone in this room has heard me say that the average Burlingtonian is spending 44% of their income on rent. I think that is unusual. That is one of the highest ratios of its type in the country if you compare rents to incomes. And I think it really, that means, that's on the average Burlingtonian. So it's an even higher percentage if you're not making the average salary. And that is very threatening, I think, to our vision of Burlington as an equitable and inclusive place. If you have that kind of housing pressure, it means you are forcing people out, you are putting up walls to people who want to live here. And that's not what Burlington is. And we're doing something about that. As we do something about that, it does put more pressure on these transportation systems. So what are we doing on the transportation side? And I think it's a long story. So let me start with the car. It's a good place to talk about how and everyone's always a little skeptical of this, but if we come back here and have this conference in two years, the Champlain Parkway will be able to look from this, not this window, right, but the other side of the building, and you'll be able to see a project under active construction. We are about a year out from starting this project that has been talked about for 60 years. And when we build it, we're going to build it in a way that's consistent with our values in the 21st century. That was not the case with the design that we had inherited from Steve Goodkind 6 years ago, but we have made it much better. We have made it a project that accommodates modern walking and biking desires, and that is much safer. And we've worked very hard with the state and with the federal government to do that. And when we build it in a year, it will be a road we can be proud of. We are also putting significant resources into other aspects of our vehicular transportation system, because Kelly's quite right. We are not overnight going to stop. Car is going to remain the dominant way we get around for a long time. So those roadways are critical, and the bond that the voters passed a year ago is more than doubling our historic level of annual investment in our roads, so that we keep them up to standards, which was a real challenge until that vote. Kelly talked a lot about the parking progress that we're making. I see that as a critically related element. I mean, the essential that is definitely part of the transportation network, although we don't always think of it that way. And the progress we've been making there is outstanding. I won't repeat what Kelly just said. Something that in and of itself isn't going to relieve congestion or parking issues, but I think is a really exciting part about what's going on here that affects this whole vehicle fleet is, what's wrong with the fact that we have so many cars? Well, one of the big things that's wrong is the congestion and the parking pressures and the functioning of people getting around. But the more pressing issue is that cars are part of what's ruining the earth, basically, right? I mean, particularly here, it is the part of our climate change challenge that we have struggled most to rein in. We've actually been moving in the right direction, certainly with our electricity. We now have this remarkable milestone we hit in 2014 of sourcing 100% of our electricity from renewable generation, and we should be able to sustain that. So essentially, Burlington's electricity is not part of the climate change problem. Our heating of our buildings still is, but we're getting better and better at that. A lot, the people in this room, in this building, on this floor are making sure of that, and we've come a long way in the building sector, and we have some very exciting possibilities on the near horizon if we can get this district heating plan implemented, which we are closer than we've ever been to. That would be a big further step in the right direction there. And I think the day when we don't really see heating of our buildings driving climate change is not that far out. Transportation is different. Like the vehicle miles traveled go up and up, and we're burning more and more gasoline right now to do that. There's a glimmer of hope on this front through strategic electrification and the work BED has been doing over the last couple of years to think really proactively about how we transform our vehicle fleet, both on the mass transit side, where we've been experimenting with electric buses, but even more promisingly on the personal vehicle side, so that when people are getting in their car, they're getting in a car that is powered by electricity, and that electricity is sourced from renewable generation. I think it's a pretty exciting vision of the future that we are better positioned to pursue here in Burlington than just about anywhere else. And you're starting to see it happen. I mean, since we announced an incentive program at the beginning of the summer, a local incentive program to go along with the state and federal and manufacturer incentives, we have seen dozens of Burlington households get rid of their gas guzzling vehicles and buy electric vehicles. And every time we do that, you are making a real transformation. And my household is one of them, and it's been a really exciting thing. It changes the way you think about driving, and I encourage anyone who's thinking about it to consider it. The incentives are still out there. That's what we're doing on cars. What are we doing on active transportation? A lot. That same bond that improved our streets is also leading to a total turnaround in the way we take care of our sidewalks. We have 130 miles of sidewalks in Burlington, and we were only replacing about 1 mile of sidewalk a year until the bond passed. If you do the math on that, that's not good. Sidewalks do not last 130 years. We have, in this first year of implementing the new bond, we have more than tripled that historic output, which gets you down into about the right range, because sidewalks do last, if you take care of them right, 30 or 40 years. And so we have, if we can continue this, and we will continue this for the next 4 years, what happens beyond that will be another challenge, but we'll get it done, I'm confident. We will be responsibly taking care of our sidewalk system, which is critical if we want to, encourage people to walk. Biking, we just opened the whole northern bike path, which is, again, in part from that bond. 5 miles of the 8-mile lakefront bike path have now been rebuilt and enhanced. But on both respects, biking and walking, just sort of replacing, taking care of what we have is not enough, and we know that. And that's why a year and a half ago, we, with the city council, passed with a really strong vote a walk-bike master plan that really lays out what additional active transportation projects we will be pursuing over the next 15 years. It was very detailed what we were going to try to do in the next 5 years, and I see Nicole Loesch is here with us today, who's the individual most responsible for making sure we do that. We've just finished our first year of implementing those projects, and it's a really exciting part about where we're headed as a city. And Nicole has to withstand, this is transformational stuff, and it's sometimes controversial, and she takes a lot of flack for that, but I hope people in this room also give her a lot of credit for the leadership she's doing there. So let's have a quick applause for Nicole. Then we have the mass transit story as well, which again, we've had progress on. For decades, we had hoped to replace the Church Street bus shelter with something that was appropriate and met the need and offered more dignity to people who were using the buses. And we have done that with this wonderful Trix Collins designed downtown transit center. Does everyone know? I'm curious. Does everyone know what I'm talking about here? Yeah. All right. I see a lot of nodding heads. So I won't belabor it then. Great. But it is up. It is functioning. It still looks, looks great, and it's important that it look and feel great, right? Because something like 2 million trips either started or ended at that facility every year, and by making it a better experience, that we expect that number, that combined with strengthening the bus system, will go up from there. And it's a very important step to strengthening that system. Now, then there's this whole kind of other area of interesting stuff that's happened over the last few years that affects each of those three areas. The Vermont Public Interest Research Group put out this report in 2015 that was sort of a challenge to us that said, the way you make your transportation system better is by doing, is not always by doing these big, expensive, capital-intensive things where you're building new highways or new rail systems or whatever. That sometimes what is involved is making those systems work better and using modern technology to work better. And you know what, Burlington, you're not doing so great at that, was the message of their report. They put us down towards the bottom of, I think we were 56th on a 69 city list in terms of incorporating these 11 modern technologies into our transportation systems. And and we had 4 of the 11, and one of them they were sort of giving us a gentleman's C for having it, in that they were giving us credit for having Uber at the time when it wasn't even really legal for Uber to be operating at the time, if I've got my timing right. So since then we have made important changes to our ordinance so that Uber and Lyft are operating here, and there's been an explosion of use of that type of technology. I mean, Burlingtonians are voting with their feet on that, and they are saying that this is a really important new transportation link. Something like, I meant to check the stats. It's a stunning number. I think we are, I think it's amounting to almost 10,000, just shy of 10,000 rides a month of trips that are being done over that platform. I saw 7 days this year. Katie, don't print that without me double checking the numbers, but it is, I'm pretty sure it's approaching that. We can tell that because we get a quarter for every trip that starts or stops in Burlington, and we set that rate of a quarter not really knowing how much revenue it would generate. We hoped it would generate enough to cover our costs. That's how you set fees, and it turns out it is almost, it is generating almost exactly the $110,000 a year that we need to enforce that system well. We've also added, in part because Uber and Lyft arrived, the taxis stepped up their game and they added taxi hailing technology. Something that we pushed hard for and that is up now is real-time transit data for mass transit riders, so that you can look on your phone and know where your bus is and when it's coming. Katie Jickling and I were at a coffee yesterday where we had a complaint that maybe it isn't working as well as it should, but I was watching it through I think we're still ironing out the kinks on some of these things, but we have come a long way in terms of adding these technologies. Another one is on the near horizon, which is bike sharing. There's CAPMA and a number of people in the room are working hard to try to bring that to Burlington soon. So, I belabor this because I think this is really important. The point of the VPIRG report is that if you get these technologies right, you make much easier car light or even car-free lifestyles for people living within the city. What does that mean? Well, I look at my own life and I think this is what it means. We are a one-car family, even though we've got 2 working parents and 2 kids that need to be carted around the city. And we are able to do that in large part because we have car share here, and I see Yanni Borden out there, and the car share system has also gotten even stronger since this report. We are able to do this because of Uber and Lyft in significant part as well. And it's going to, and that gets even easier to do when you have, these things start working together, when you have better and better walking and biking infrastructure working hand in hand with these technologies. You really move towards a place where people don't have to buy 2 cars. And that is a huge positive in terms of housing affordability. It is huge positive in terms of economic development. The average, this is a car share stat, I think, let me tell you, and correct me if I get it wrong, but the average household spends the average Vermont household spends $7,400 a year? No. Up more? What is it, David? It's now over $8,000 a year per vehicle, right? So here's the way I think of the math is, we're not spending that $8,000 a year with the second vehicle. If we're spending a few $100 a month on car share and Lyft, we are way ahead of the game of where we could be. And I think if we get this better and better, more and more households will start thinking in that direction. So where do we go from here? A couple of final things. One thing, and it's a Charlie Baker here, something that he and I have been talking about and others have been talking about, I think we do need to be doing more with regional housing strategies tied to transportation. These major arterials that come in, radiate out from Burlington, I think represent a real opportunity for additional housing and job creation. I think that's where we should be focusing in a way we have not been so intentional about. That's where we should be focusing future Chittenden County growth. If we get that right, and we need to change some state and probably local land use policies to get it right, that kind of densification around transit lines is what strengthens a bus system. That you don't really get improvement. You don't get a great bus system without density. And once you get outside of Burlington and Winooski, you really don't have the densities you need to make it work right. We could be doing more on that. And if I get to keep working on these issues, that's one direction that I'd be focused on in the next 3 years. And then finally, how do we get that last image up there, Kelly? I'm an optimist on most things, not that one, no, but go back. I love that. I've never seen that before. I do know the story. What a great photo. I love the dog being part of it. Keep going. This one. All right, so here's why. So I'm an optimist on the future of Burlington in so many ways. I think as we get our housing policy right, as we get our transportation policies right, as the world continues, as the technological advances continue at the spectacular rate we've seen over recent decades, there's some people who think that is going to be bad for cities. I totally disagree. I think driverless vehicles, which are coming, autonomous vehicles, will have the chance to really, I think that it is very likely, the futurists who say that it is going to decrease the parking need in the future, I think are going to be right. I think we've hit peak parking demand. We see that with our, you hear about peak oil a lot. I think we've hit peak parking. You see that at our airport. More and more people are coming through other ways instead of parking there and keeping their vehicle there for a long time. That's actually a challenge for us financially in some ways, but we're sorting through those challenges. It is an opportunity for us in that we have the public right-of-way right now is so dominated by asphalt for our travel lanes and for our parking stalls that we miss out on these other important public values. And as things continue to evolve, I think you are going to see the possibility. This is something, again, if I get another 3 years, I really want to work hard on. I think when we transform Main Street from a street that today in many blocks, we use 73 feet of the 99-foot right-of-way for asphalt, just to support just 2 lanes of travel and diagonal parking on both sides. We can transform that, lose just a handful, a tiny drop of parking in the sea of parking we have in the downtown. We have 8,000 spaces that are never full in the downtown, and because of Kelly and her work and Public Works, we're doing a better job telling people where those are. We can if we make that simple change, we can get street trees back that we used to have on Main Street that you see in those old photos that was part of making this Burlington a great downtown. You can get protected bike lanes that continue this change in the way people get around the city. And you can do something about cleaning up Lake Champlain through what you're seeing there by the Main Street sign, which is what we call green infrastructure, which basically would collect the water that is falling on the street, and instead of sending it right out into the lake with the pollutants and the phosphorus that it has today, it will get filtered through this green infrastructure that also improves the quality of life of our streets. I mean, that is an image of what it might look like in front of Ski Rack in just a few years, which, and, you know, think about the times you've been there with your kids trying to get some kind of piece of equipment out of or North Star Sports, you know, and there's the sidewalks are totally overloaded, and you know, you're just in this sea of asphalt. You know, we've gotten used to it. It could be so much better, and I think that's what this slide shows, and I think that's where we're headed if we keep working on these issues together. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Jeff Olson is our keynote speaker. He's a principal at Alta Planning and Design, a firm committed to transforming communities one trip, one step, one street, park, trail, and intersection at a time. Jeff's an architect, planner, and author who has been involved in greenways, open space, active living, and alternative mobility projects for more than 25 years. He has had a diverse career with national, international, and local experience in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. Jeff is reluctantly not a resident of Burlington, but has strong connections to the city, including professional partnerships with Burlington institutions such as UVM's Department of Transportation. He is a frequent visitor here because, well, now that his daughter is a UVM alumni, he's now working hard on his son, trying to get him to attend the Queen City and UVM. Welcome, Jeff Olson.
My daughter, by the way, is a student here, did raise a money working for the UVM Foundation for K-9 scholarships that she was awarded, so that's a great territory. Oh, you don't use the mic? I was just giving her a moment to set up there. First of all, thanks for having me here. I have a quick question for all of you. Look into the future of Burlington. You need three categories. Why don't you raise your hands? Do you see Burlington being bronze? Pretty good? Bronze? You see Burlington being silver? Not bad? Getting there? How many people see Burlington as gold? Okay, how many people see a category? Not everybody raised their hand. So the rest of you have to assume are either thinking platinum or diamond, right? Burlington is the greatest place ever. One of the hardest things about coming to Burlington as a speaker, personally, is that I come here, this is a place I've always come to and like, impressed and happy to be here. I live in the other side of the mountains here in Saratoga, New York. And you know, I bring stuff back to Saratoga, but we share so much in common. And whether it's businesses like Global Foundries, we both have a very common connection there. Curtis Lumber right down the street from Boston Spa, New York. Uncommon Grounds, coffee shop owned by our friends the Murphys. These are all places that, you know, are businesses that share between our two communities. But I have always looked at Burlington as a place that is setting the bar higher, that is taking things to that next level. And I know that when we talk about moving forward, we talk about transportation, I want to dispel a couple of myths before I even start. One is I am not here to solve all the problems. And none of what I'm going to talk about is going to solve all the problems. And I'm particularly interested in active mobility, walking and biking, whether it's for transportation or recreation. That's maybe a 10% solution to a lot of the things that we work on. Unless you're from one of those places that are platinum or diamond. Some of us have a chance to get to Amsterdam or Copenhagen. Copenhagen right now, 51% is their target of all trips by bicycle. Okay? They're already at 42, and they're trying to get to 51. So there's the competition. That is out there. There are places actually doing that right now. The challenge that we face is how do we get from here to there, if that's where we really want to get to. How do we accommodate all the modes of transportation and mobility equally, especially knowing that there's technology that's going to change? How do we help families that are spending $8,000 a year? What could be money for better housing, could be money for better food, for better health, for all of those other issues, by incrementally making those changes or more significantly making those changes. So, like I said, I don't want to make you think there's any way that what I can talk about is going to solve the entire problem. but I do hope that it at least can put us in the right direction. Some of the solutions are fairly simple. I'm lucky enough to live in a place where biking the Lake Champlain bikeway system has always been one of my favorite things. This photo was taken on a trip I did around, actually around Lake Ontario, through Ontario, Quebec, and then back to Montreal and down to Burlington. And this photo was taken, I'm sitting in what had been a single car parking space across the lake here in Plattsburgh, New York. If Plattsburgh can do that and create cafe space out of street space, imagine somebody in Plattsburgh right now is thinking, he's saying that in Burlington. I mean, they are so excited. This is Main Street, Plattsburgh, right? And these cafes are thriving. And it really was very low cost, not a huge change, and gave me a little spot to sit and start. Actually, I was working on writing this book. That was sort of my final editing phase while I was biking around the lake. When we look at sort of the three phases of this quick presentation today, are going to be what, so what, and now what. And that comes from Harry Truman, who basically said, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. These issues are important for the future, and they're the issues that we're working on many other ways. Transportation, mobility, infrastructure are not necessarily things we always directly associate with these things, but they help in every single one of them. Economics, as we just talked about, that cost per household, the cost of maintaining and building the infrastructure that we have, the ability to attract and retain business and make sure that those of us here have our companies that want to grow. I tell you, if I could do one thing over again in life, I'd start another company and I'd be in this building. This is just the greatest thing. And who doesn't want to be up here in a place that's bringing wind and solar and clean energy to the future that's going to help make this place last for years to come? Burlington has one of the greatest sets of advantages when you think about the bones of a place to be. You have got the greatest bones. I mean, there it is, right? You've got water. You have the potential for energy. You have agriculture close to. We're going to be able to have food here at times maybe when other places don't. Forest products, agriculture, so important to be able to have a place that has what it takes to be able to exist. We are in a rapidly changing world. There's lots of stuff going on outside there, but we're not going to talk about that, right? Because Burlington is the place that can do all the things that the others can. The question is, can we make mobility part of that solution? So, free copy of my book. This is going to give you a little hint about where I'm from and my favorite music. This is a lyric from a song. Somebody can tell me what artist, where that artist is from, and which song gets a copy of the book. But really, someday, we will look back on this and it will all seem funny. How many people have seen this happen? Person with a dog out the window? All right, see, I have yet to show this image to any audience where nobody had ever seen this happen. This is not good for the dog. This is not a good thing for the dog. And while it is possible that the driver may have some mobility need that is not met otherwise, and this is the only option available, I don't think that's likely to be the case for a great many people. So how do we move beyond this point? Look, I drove here yesterday, and it was one of the most beautiful afternoons. How can you not love being here? And the views of the mountains, and it was a great drive, right? And I have 3 cars. I actually really like them. I just don't use them all the time for everything I do. And the space they take up in our communities is an issue, because that space could be used for other things. So this is not a presentation that's in any way saying the car is going to go away. The question is, how can we manage it and have it work to our advantage with all the technologies we use? That's going to be true whether we're talking about electric bikes, or we're talking about next generation buses, or we're talking about any other infrastructure. How does it make our community a better place? It's really the question we need to answer. So no, nobody's got that lyric yet. You can't use Google. We just search that. Got a back here?
Bruce Springsteen, Rosalita.
Fantastic. Which state? That's the easy one.
What state?
What state was the song written in?
New Jersey.
All right. I don't often admit it, but I am from New Jersey. You can get a copy of the book. Like I said, I wish I lived in Burlington. Brief history of transportation in America, and I'm going to go through this really quick. Anybody know Art Crumb, the great cartoonist from 1970? We started with this bucolic, incredible landscape, and we're somewhere now probably in the next to last row. I really hope the last row is something we're going to skip entirely, and we'll just go straight to something closer back to the very beginnings. The images of Church Street are right out of the story, and I ask you, as we think about the future and we deal with some of the very difficult and challenging conversations in this community, they're important conversations to have. They're emotional. They are as much emotional as they are rational, and that's true of a lot of things in this country right now. But to allow everyone to have the chance to not only think forward, but to think back. I don't think it's possible to imagine the Burlington we're in now from the ones I first experienced in the 1980s, when a good friend of mine lived right here on Pine Street, and I spent a lot of time with Chicken Bone, and I got away with that, didn't I? It's gone now. Those of you who are here will probably know what I'm talking about, or possibly not remember. I can't tell the difference. We don't really think, if we were around then saying that Burlington is going to be this Burlington, and all these businesses, innovation centers, new technologies happening, new companies happening, organizations like Global Foundries coming to Burlington, those are things we could not possibly have imagined. And the forces that shape them are significant. They are at societal scale. They're not all things that we control. So just think back a little bit as we move forward. I want to make this personal because I think the decisions we talk about involve people in so many levels of society, and bear with me because this is one of the few times I will tell this story in public. I just rode a bike with my brother the other day. My older brother is disabled. He now lives with my parents in South Florida, another place I don't want to live, but I do have to visit frequently as a result. And when he moved there about a year ago, my brother weighed about 330 pounds, about 3 years back. When he moved to Florida, and it was not a move of choice, he said, the one thing I want to do is be able to ride a bike. I want to go back. I haven't ridden a bicycle in 20 years. So I bought him a bike. I bought him this bicycle. My brother now has lost 130 pounds. His diabetes numbers are down to a level that his doctors are almost taking him off his medicine. His heart and blood pressure problems that he was experiencing are largely a thing of the past right now. He rode that bike about 350 days last year. Almost every day except for a couple hurricanes. And the point I'm trying to make is that, look, that's also the brand new car I just bought him as well. And I don't want to say we're going to get rid of those things, but what I want us to think about, and I want you to think about my brother, is our community allowing someone like him to make that change in his life, even if we don't want to do it ourselves personally. His ability to move to where he did made that change happen because the place he lived in before did not allow him to ride a bike safely. And now he's living in a place where he does, okay? That simple thing of creating a community where people have the choice to be able to do that is going to save a lot of us a lot of money on his future healthcare bills, I can tell you that, and me personally. You talk about your family savings. So these things are personal. They're very human. There's a story behind everyone and the choices that they make about how we choose to come here today, how we choose to make it possible for our community to move. For me, it's a little different, and last night I set myself back on my personal diet. I do try to ride about 10 miles a pint or ski a day for something like that. I've got some magic number. It does work out, by the way, if you look at the craft beer index, that your typical IPA pint is the equivalent number of calories of biking 10 miles. I've got that dialed in. So 10 miles a pint. Hey, if I go out on a really good day, I can have a great weekend. It's all a matter of how you look at it. So, and if it all goes well, I get to be a pro pig while I'm doing it. I want you to think about these issues in the broadest possible social sense in the community, and I love that Burlington is a place that uses terms like New Americans. If we dealt with immigration policy the way some people would think, my wife is here with me today, would have to go back to Canada. She's first generation and was born from parents from another country here in the U.S. I'm very happy she's a citizen. Thank you for that. This image happens to be in Chicago, in one of the, really one of the more challenged neighborhoods in the country. And they are working with everyone at a personal level, very much similar to what Go Burlington and others are doing here, with many organizations that are working in this community to make that change at the grassroots level, and to think about every person, no matter what their age, their race, their economic status. Look, all of us hopefully are going to be lucky enough to be able to live long lives and live here in place, but not if we slip and fall and break a hip on the sidewalk, right? I walked here this morning and I can tell you a couple spots where most people would have given up, and in fact at one point, since I was near a bus stop and the bus was coming, I jumped on the bus. So I answered your question this morning. I both walked and took the bus. The reason I took the bus was the sidewalk was just completely not cleared for several blocks. And it hasn't snowed in quite a while, right? That should be something we can take care of. Those 130 miles matter in this community. They matter for the woman who was standing next to me at the bus stop. They matter for all of us. And every trip that's taken by any other mode of transportation makes it easier for those of us who choose to drive. Okay, so you can be selfish. There's nothing wrong with that. When we get to so what, I want to frame this about the position that the city is in, that the region is in, to be able to stay at that leading edge. You are doing things that are extraordinary. I really hope, I'm not saying that just because I'm a guest here today, that I really do get the sense from everyone here in this room and the organizations that are working here that you are very much on the path and moving forward and accelerating. Keep going. That's all I can tell you. But when you look around and see what others are doing, maybe it helps inspire you a little bit. So, welcome to the global competition. How many people have heard of Curitiba, Brazil? Anybody been there? Okay. This street, okay, is it Curitiba? Curitiba may be one of the more sustainable large cities on earth, population of 2 million. 50% of all trips taken on a bus rapid transit network that is fueled by biofuel that is grown in Brazil. This street is known as the 72-hour street because it was built in 3 days. It was a 4-lane road through the middle of downtown. Mayor Jaime Lerner decided he wanted to change that, started on Friday afternoon, and opened the street to the public on Monday. 72 hours. This is the 72-hour street. This image, I took this photo, it was late at night. I was definitely out at 10:30, and this street is absolutely full of people. That's happening, okay? So maybe a little faster than, was it 6 years, Mayor? I think something like that. Maybe we can speed up the process a little bit, but we can't overlook the need to have that engaging conversation in the community and to listen to all aspects of these issues, because every one of those perspectives matters. There are going to be people who their choice of getting around is going to continue to be the one that they're making now. There are going to be others that we hope we can change by changing that built environment. I urge you in the strongest possible sense to be careful of new technologies and the law of unintended consequences. While many of us grew up watching things like the Jetsons, it is unclear where automated vehicles and new technology will take us. The thing that you need to get right, that we need to get right here in Burlington, is to make this a great city that technology serves, not the other way around. We do not want to end up, well, yesterday I would have loved to have dialed in the program and have my car take me to go skiing and then bring me here in the afternoon, park the car, get rid of it, and then let me walk around. I like that idea. But the opposite is also true. What happens if we don't get the city to be good enough, of high enough quality, that people just live somewhere else, push a button in the morning, it makes them coffee, and it drives them to where they're going. And they spend 2 hours in the car, and you can live up in the Northeast Kingdom and work here, right? Is that what we want? I'm not sure that we do. Because our agricultural lands, our forest lands, the surroundings that are here are as much a part of our future as any other issue that we deal with, and that is a transportation issue. We don't want to repeat the suburban sprawl that the automobile here created. So just be careful what you ask for when you ask for new technology. I love this stuff, but I want to make sure that we build the community first and then use technology to make it work. We look at some of the data, and since this is a business audience today, when you look at things like Walk Score, I don't know how many people here have used Walk Score to value a property recently. This is coming from Lincoln Institute and major portions of the real estate industry. Ideally, the score here in Burlington for Walk Score would be something closer to 100. I'll be honest, I thought the number is lower than I expected, and certainly could be higher by making those improvements. These are the factors that people are choosing nationally, which the data is very significant about the generation that's currently getting into home buying, and not necessarily all of them owning, but either buying, renting, choosing to locate businesses, value walkability so much that the real estate industry has created an online score sheet. And there's also transit score, bike score, et cetera. So let's get that 56 closer to 100. When we look at what some interesting communities are doing, and I think Burlington is as much a winter town as any other season, and cards on the table, I'm a skier, and family of skiers. This is Mammoth, California, where we've just laid out a plan for them to connect their ski infrastructure into a new town center and reorganize their built environment around a live, work, play, ski in, ski out community. They have never done anything like this before. They're talking about a very significant investment. They're looking at using automated technologies for things like the long drive from Los Angeles to Mammoth. That's a trip they'd like to get rid of, people having to do themselves. Using it for freight deliveries within the community so truck traffic is reduced. But focusing on walkability and the ability to change what right now is a drive of a short distance to get up to the hill, get rid of that entirely and refocus where their development is. So they're thinking about all those things, and it's not just transportation, it's also recreation, quality of life. It's about mobility as a whole and rethinking the idea of how we move and how that can shape our communities. There are other places doing some extraordinary things, and I've been lucky enough to work in Jackson Hole for at least 15 years, and I just want another cautionary tale. Most of what they've done started in tragedy, and I can only hope that this doesn't happen anywhere else, and certainly not here in Burlington. It was the death of a 13-year-old biking with her family in Grand Teton National Park that led to a very significant community movement, followed unfortunately by another death just shortly, same period of time, in 6 months, of a National Park Service ranger on the same road. And that community, like many others, probably could have said, all right, this is just, we should stop doing these things. These are unsafe. We should move away from that. And instead, the families involved helped create a movement that has led to one of the most extraordinary communities for active mobility, transportation, recreation, innovation. They have done projects that people told them they were completely impossible. And I was lucky enough this summer while we were out there during the time of the solar eclipse, which was a pretty amazing thing to see, to be standing on a new bridge over the Snake River. That was a project that was so impossible we were told to take it out of the plan at the time. Never talk about that bridge again. It was in the 25-year future long-range plan that was outside the plan we were doing. That was only 7 years ago. The bridge is now built. So when people tell you that the things that you think you're going to do can't get done, just think about that bridge. It is totally possible, and to stand there and watch the eclipse from that location is really something I will never forget, and particularly because how hard it was to do that project. There were people who lost their jobs over it. There were people who went to the mat time and time again. It was not an easy thing to do. It is now one of the most beloved parts of that community. And after all that opposition, all the people who were opposed to it now, they went through the 3 stages of every difficult project. Total opposition, grudging acceptance by the opposition, then the opposition claiming it was their idea in the first place. So that's where we're headed. Places like Memphis, Tennessee, who would imagine that in Memphis you could crowdsource the money to build a new street over a long weekend? Okay, they took a page out of the Curitiba playbook. This was funded by local businesses who, a project that we were working on connecting 2 major parks together, didn't quite have enough money to get through this sort of almost Pine Street-like district, and they wanted to do a facility like this. Well, they went out and crowdsourced the funding, raised $75,000 in a weekend, and were ready to start building the project just a couple weeks later. That's Memphis, Tennessee. How many people before now would have thought of Memphis as an innovator in active mobility, right? If Memphis can do this, Burlington can do this. How about Atlanta? There's a place that somebody had told me 10 years ago that Atlanta would restructure its entire economic development strategy and build a new kind of downtown that really does not exist around a loop trail that was a former set of railroad lines that has now generated hundreds of millions of dollars in new economic development. I probably would not have told you folks you should go to Atlanta. Okay, that's not a place that would have been, all apologies to our friends in Atlanta, it's lined with public art, new housing, new economic development of all kinds, new public markets. This has become Atlanta's main street. It's a facility that looks exactly like that. Some of the biggest companies in the world, and we have Global Foundries here, we had staff embedded at Google for several years working on a new way of rethinking Silicon Valley's infrastructure. And this story got reported out as Silicon Valley wants to become the next Copenhagen. And they're literally involved in helping to fund and make projects happen. In a couple of minutes, I'm going to start asking all of you, what role is it that you want to play in doing this? Because if companies like Google are doing that, and if we have similar companies here, and their employees want to live, work, and play in these environments, how do we play a role in making that happen? One of my favorite examples, and every time I talk about this project, I still have to even think to myself, did that really happen? We were approached by the Walton Family Foundation just about maybe 5, 6 years ago, I guess, about the last time when the mayor and I first met. They were investing a small amount of money in building some trails in northwest Arkansas. And you have to picture northwest Arkansas the same way I would picture the parts of New Jersey that I grew up in. You know, just suburbia, no real centers of these towns, trying to become something that they weren't yet. Obviously home to one of the world's largest corporations. And the family wanted to change that. They wanted to see that change. We developed a 30-mile spine greenway system, helped them not only take the money they were using, but leverage it and match it. We then did a bike and walk action plan for every community and a complete streets plan, all of which were adopted in 32 different municipalities and 2 counties, a safe routes to schools plan for every school, and all that is built. That's happening. They just hosted the IMBA World Mountain Bike Summit, and they have a goal of putting a local kid into the Olympics in mountain biking in 2 more Olympic Games. And the way they're doing it is there's a mountain bike park at every school. And every gym teacher has got a set of bikes, and those bikes are there to get those kids out riding. And every neighborhood's going to be connected to their network. They built 6 new major scale mountain bike parks. All that happened in the last 6 years. Okay, with leadership from the public, private, nonprofit sector. So again, if Northwest Arkansas can do that, game changer for me personally, those of you who know my background a little bit, in addition to being a partner at Alta Planning and Design, we started a little side company called Alta Bike Share, and we ran the largest bike share systems in North America for about 5 years. This is City Bike number 1. I'll just wrap up in a couple minutes here. 0001 at City Hall the day we launched. The reason I use this image, in the 5 years that we owned our bike share company, we went from 0 trips in the United States to 30 million rides, 5 years, 30 million rides and 0 fatalities. We thought we were heroes, we really did. It was very exciting, we sold the company. But here's the thing, today in China, from the same 0 point just 3 years ago now, there will be 30 million rides taken in China on bike share today. There will be 30 million more tomorrow. The Chinese fleet has gone from nothing to 10 million bikes in just 3 years. The United States went from nothing to about 25,000 bikes in that same period of time. So again, we go back to that global competition and the forces of change that are going to happen and the scale of things that we're going to see. We need to be prepared to be part of that as well. And some of these things are happening bigger and faster than even we can imagine. So now what? I'm going to just a couple more minutes wrap up here. I really do believe that we are sitting right now today at a moment in time in one of the greatest places in the world, not just in the United States. I really do feel that, and I'm not just saying that to make you guys feel good. I really think Burlington is unique, is a one-of-a-kind, unbelievably great place. I mean, you just have to look out the window, right? The opportunity is here to get to that next level. And I'm just going to throw out some ideas. I'm going to say, all of you do the same. This is what our breakout sessions are going to be. There are so many things that we could do. Some of them are really big. I've always thought we should have a chairlift, and that when it snows, we possibly could not plow the streets. Budweiser used to sponsor this. They had the Budweiser Urban Ski. Anybody remember Budweiser Urban Ski? They used State Street in Albany, New York, used from the state capitol down to the waterfront, had slalom gates on it. You just walk up the street with your skis and ski. Why not? Right? Why can't we rethink the way that we have our built environment? As the mayor said, we've got streets where we're using that asphalt just to drive cars on. There's so many other ways we could use that space and still be able to drive cars. The Great Streets program that you're working on. Possibly a loop greenway around the entire city to take the Loop City bike route to a new level. Really thinking about how we get downtown from where I'm staying at Hotel Vermont down to the waterfront and as the redevelopment starts to happen. Maybe the ferries come back to be centered downtown. There are 100 different ideas out there, and this is just a short list that I was kind of working up to begin to get everyone here to think about how do I play a role, each one of us, in making that change. And I want you to remember this diagram and start filling it in as we move to the breakout session. Whether you're in the public sector, the private sector, or the nonprofit sector, there is a role that you and your organization can play to make this happen. You've got leadership in many of these quadrants working together really, really well. Every one of them needs to be on the same page at the same time moving forward, because change is not easy. Change requires being organized, being professional, being involved, being engaged, putting the resources into making that change happen. Listening in the community, which I think we do a very good job here, of making sure that everybody feels that they are part of making that change happen, right? Again, I think Burlington does a better job of this than most places, and you're on the right track. So I want you right now, if you can, think about what's one thing you're going to leave here today that you or your organization or an organization you can be involved in will help do to make Burlington more mobile, to make it safer, healthier, and improve our quality of life. So I ask you, don't just dream, but dream big. You know, we have streets that look like this all over the place. Why can't they look like that? So, enjoy that dream. And here's the second half of the photo I started off with, because there are places where someday we'll look back on this, it will all seem funny. This is almost the same image, right? And yet this woman's having a great time, and so is the dog. So, everything that we talk about is possible. I know we can get there. I really encourage you to do so. My contact info is up there if you need to reach out to me later. I'll be around all day and this evening. Copies of my book are available. Somebody's already got one. And I just want to, again, I can't thank you enough. It is such an absolute joy to be here. I feel strongly about the future of this community, and I hope all of you do as well. You've got the right pieces in place. You're on the right path. Just keep going forward. Thank you.
Okay, we're about ready to do some breakout groups. Sarah, I can't get that to come back to the main screen, so you can be my assistant here. I have a name tag, and there's a letter on your name tag, A, B, C, D. You can rip off your name tag, look at that, put it back on. If you have a D, don't move. It's going to work right here. A is in the Antioch meeting room, B, for Magog meeting room, and the AT classroom is C. So I think we have some people that can direct you over there. And we'll do this till about 10:15, and then come back and look at our progress.
And we'll be able to have some Q&A with Jeff and our panel when we come back together.
Okay, can we get groups A, B, C, and D to come and sit down so we can do a wrap up here for the Burlington Business Association Summit? A, B, C, D. And we need Jeff Olson, and we're looking for Jim. Jim Barr. There he is. Keynote speaker Jeff Olson, where are you? So I know we have Group D, right? They're right there. Is Group B here? B? B. Okay, how about C? C? Is A? Where did A go? Oh, so some of the A is here. All right, we're just looking for Jeff. Jeff out riding his bike. You know what he's doing? Okay, Jeff is making his way down. The BBA Business Summit today, I'll just thank some people right now. Brought to you by our presenting sponsor, AARP Vermont and the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, and title sponsors Pomerleau Real Estate and Free Press Media. Let's also thank our silver event sponsors, Farrell Distributing, Halverson's Upstreet Cafe, TD Bank, City Market, Hilton Garden Inn, Burlington Telecom, 7th Generation, City Place Burlington, Burlington Electric Department, Truex Cullens, Dincy, also Champlain College, JMM, Dark Star Lighting and Production, Reconciled It, Hilton Burlington, Redstone, South Burlington Business Association, and the Regional Bike Share Pilot Program. And our sponsor host today, VEIC, and catering sponsors, City Market. Thank you so much. And our platinum members, Comcast Business, REM Development, Casella Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, People's United Bank, KeyBank, UVM Medical Center, PC Construction, Primer, Piper, Eggleston, and Kramer PC. All right, we're going to get Jeff Olson seated here, and we'll begin our program. See what we learned. All right, on the panel we have BBA Executive Director Kelly Devine, of course. We've got our keynote speaker Jeff Olson, Executive Director of Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission Charlie Baker, and the Director of Transportation and Parking Services at UVM Jim Barr. Thank you for participating, and we're going to see what they think about some of the things you guys worked on. So we'll start with Group A, and the beliefs of Group A. Transit is intimidating, uninviting, and routes are complicated. Belief by some that cyclists don't pay for roads, and as a result, roads should cater specifically to cars. People that use public transportation aren't like me. Infrastructure projects are expensive and take forever. Kelly, what do you think about that?
I'm gonna rely on a couple of my panel members to address that, but I'm going to talk about number 4, infrastructure projects. They are expensive and they do take a long time. If you start looking at road miles that we have in a community like Burlington, I think that we as members of the community need to continue to think about not only what that investment costs today, but what it costs over the long term. And you know, Burlington is not a big city. Our general fund budget is about $65 million. And I think it's a good part of the conversation to remember that any kind of capital improvement or infrastructure work is our communal investment in our future. So I have to agree with the statement, and I think it's an important thing to really be thinking about when you think about and when you begin to talk about broader transportation policy. I'm going to turn it over to Jim Barr, who runs a fleet of buses up at UVM, to talk about, I'm going to have you do 1 and 3.
You're assigning? I don't get to pick my own. How come you get to pick your own?
They're not your beliefs, Jim. They're their beliefs. So just comment.
No.
Okay.
So as I get a crick in my neck looking up there, transportation, intimidating and uninviting, and routes are complicated, and people using public transportation aren't like me. So I can do both of those in one fell swoop. Everybody has a unique view of that they are the only ones that have all the challenges, that they have children that they have to drop by daycare, they have a dog that they need to take care of. They have an emergency during the day, and if I take public transportation, I might not be able to get home. And what they're missing is the ability to use multiple modes of transportation, or there are many programs and incentives out there like the emergency ride home, or you can use a cab. There's many different ways. Car share is a perfect example, being a member of car share and having that as a fallback. The public transportation people aren't like me. I guess I can go one step further, and this might be a touchy subject, but there's a lot of folks who are low income and can't afford a car. And so if they're the ones that tend to ride the public transportation all the time, then after a while it gets viewed of, well, that's for poor people and I'm not poor, or that's for somebody that there's just a stigma out there. And we really need to do a better job of communication and marketing and incentives and showing people that all of these opportunities aren't as difficult as they seem to be.
Okay, so you were agreeing with some of the solutions, so let's have Jeff finish it up with Group A. How about that cyclist thing?
Well, first of all, it's absolutely true. So we're done. I think the comment earlier about, when you look at what streets are for and what cities are for, why do we even, live in the places that we're in? Cities are about getting people together, about sharing culture, about sharing commerce, about human beings being social. And our streets need to serve that purpose. That's what they're there for. They're not really about any particular mode of transportation at any point in time, but they're about providing all those purposes. So transportation and recreation and mobility fit in within that. So if our city is about culture, about commerce, about people being social, then which of those modes provide that is really the question we should be answering.
Very good. All right, let's go to Group B. All
Okay,
right.
so I just want to let folks know, if it's in red, it's probably been covered by another group. We had the idea that transit isn't for me being a pretty common theme. Also, if you took your folder, there's a pen and an index card in there. If you have another question you'd like to present to the panel, feel free to fill that out. You can let Sarah or another member of our team know, and we'll get that to you.
Or wave to Peter and somebody will collect it for you. That'd be great. So Group B beliefs active transportation is seen as a divisive issue in Burlington, especially in the New North End. Biking not yet safe in Burlington, it's easy to get hit. And generational difference in views about biking and walking. Charlie, you want to chime in on that? Maybe
sure.
not.
So we've spent a lot of time trying to support the North Ave effort, and I think that we got to look at the broader issues. Jeff started to go here. I mean, those public rights of way are for the public to use. And it's for all users, walking, biking, and cars. And I think what we're really trying to do with those rights of way is trying to find the right balance of use for them. So we don't need 90% for cars if there isn't a lot of vehicle traffic on that road. If there are we have that volume that requires 4 lanes of road or traffic, that's fine. But where we don't, we need to find the best use for that right of way. And so just to go to another town, South Burlington, we looked at Williston Road. There was a segment where we didn't need 4 lanes, converted that to 2 lanes of traffic, added bike lanes. But then as you get closer to Burlington, you needed 4 lanes. So the 4 lanes are still there. So we did spend a lot of time trying to make sure that it was the right users, and that means all the users. So it's really, I think it's a kind of false premise that it's kind of all or the other. It's a public right of way for all the users.
Okay, so Jeff, generational difference in views about biking and walking.
Yeah, this is a really great one. And I think the example we just used in our breakout is generational different views about smoking. There was a point in time when I was, as a kid, where it was children who told their parents that smoking wasn't good for them. And that's pretty much what changed behavior about smoking, was that another generation realized that what the older generation wasn't doing, was something that needed to be changed. I listened to Howard Dean's speech on NPR just last week. I don't know if people got a chance to hear that, about passing the torch and having a next generation come in. And I quite honestly feel the same way. I feel like right now there's a moment in time where it's my kid's generation that wants to be involved and wants to change things. And our ability to let that generation take that leadership role as fast as they possibly can. Because there's 2 options. One is they're going to feel alienated and not be involved. If you go back to reading the book Bowling Alone, we're just all going to live on our own little private world and put the VR goggles on and just not even care about each other. Or we're going to do exactly the opposite, and we're going to create that way where issues like this, and this isn't the only one, are a venue for people to get involved and active in making change happen. And we can help facilitate that. I don't think we're quite done doing our work yet. I hope everybody here in this room feels we have a lot to do. But I do think that what that generation is seeing and doing, and from a business perspective, when you look at the places they're choosing to live in, look at Walk Score and all those other measures about how walkable communities have become the most in-demand type of urban environment, we're going to see a change that happens because of those bigger forces. And it is, I hate to have to say this personally, but it's the next generation that's going to figure it out.
Kelly, you want to finish up on biking is not yet safe in Burlington. It's easy to get hit.
You know, transportation is a divisive issue. As someone who does advocacy work, you know, when a transportation issue comes up or we're going to lose parking, I can tell you I get a lot of phone calls. Another part of the challenge for downtown is that biking is not as safe as it really needs to be to support the number of people who may choose that as a mode given safer alternatives. I wouldn't say that it's easy to get hit, but I can understand why there's a broad-based perception that biking is unsafe. One of the things that's mentioned here in Solutions is an education campaign. And in talking to walk bike advocates, I think we've got to do education on both sides of the equation about that. I think we all have seen bikers acting in an unsafe way, and certainly the skateboarders, and we've also seen cars not paying attention. So we've got, we've got two sides of that issue that we can work on. Also, I mean, if you want to see what safe biking may look like in the future for Burlington, a lot of those ideas are in the Walk Bike Master Plan. I think because I represent a business community and many of you here are members, I'd love for more of our members to really think about if what they see in that plan is the future of Burlington that they envision, and what parts of that plan make sense and what parts don't. Because these issues are going to continually come up in the public forum and in the public discussion. There'll be votes on them. And I'd like to have more of a dialogue with our organization to see where we fall. Because to the generational point, and Kelly Starter-Porras here from AARP, we know from data that they've collected, it's both the boomers and the millennials that want, I don't know what I did to Matt, that want safer.
We're losing our screen here.
Yeah, they want more options for transportation. They want to live in dense downtowns. They want safer options. More of them, both of those generations. And for those like me who's in the Gen X, we're just stuck in between. Nobody cares what we think.
Okay, we're back. He said it wasn't him, so don't look at him, okay? Group C. Let's go to Group C. All right, Group C believes public transportation is not viewed as being a viable option for many residents, especially those who have a car. Never enough parking could lose shoppers and visitors to other places with lots of parking, and perception of active transportation as being unsafe. Jim, what do you think of that? Jim Barr.
Which one am I doing, Kelly?
Public transportation, number one.
Being
Jim.
viable is they have a car. Sure, that's a great one to start with. Again, I'll go back to the multimodal. Having a car, the savings, as Moreau pointed out, $8,000 in fuel, I think it was, you don't have to spend. And the other idea is that you might not have to use public transportation solely. You don't have to go all the way from one point to the next. You can incorporate bikes, you can incorporate walking, you can incorporate car share. So multimodal is really the key. But that is something that is out there, and I deal with it on a daily basis on our campus with people not understanding why I think they should park at Gutterson and take the bus in from there. Why can't they park right outside their office space? And the main reason is because there's not a space there for them. But
Charlie, you want to chime in on that on the end? One of the other two?
Well, I guess just in terms of how I think about this is really, it's about providing options. I feel like there's kind of this subtext of this of people being forced into a mode, and that's a false narrative, right? Nobody forced you to ride your bike or take a bus. You chose to do that, and I think what we're really having a conversation about is how to make those choices easier, whether it's the bike network, which we have pieces of a bike network. We don't really have a full bike network yet. It gets safer and easier to use the fuller it is. The same thing on the bus network. We have as good a bus network as they could design some years ago. GMT is looking at redesigning that bus network right now. So, it's a kind of constantly improving each one of these systems to make them better so that it's easier to make the choice that's right for you. These are all individual choices that we look at collectively, but we're providing choices.
Jeff, in your presentation, you talked about using technology to make it easier. You want to chime in and?
I also want to thank Group C. There's a whole list of actions over there, and they really came up with some great ideas. I think that a lot of it is about information and about making things easier for people to do and to make that choice. There's so much else going on in our lives that the decision about how to move on a given day or how to make an investment in our community to make it move differently over time there's a lot else that has our attention. So can we just simply make it easier? And great examples of Uber and Lyft being able to take the idea, I need to go somewhere, I tap a button on my device and the vehicle shows up, I know where it is, it's trackable. Can we make all forms of transportation that simple, easy to use for anybody of any age and any ability? And I think whether it's a kid going to school or it's a senior that chooses to retire and live here in Burlington, we all need that ease of access to get over the other barriers that we're going to find that just make it difficult to make those choices to begin with. People will choose the easier thing to do, and technology can help make that possible.
You want to end on, Kelly, with one final comment?
I want to talk about number 2. Never enough parking. Could lose shoppers and visitors to other places without lots of parking. As you can imagine, in my position, this is a belief that I get presented with all the time. And there are members of City Council that are entrenched in this belief. There are certainly members in our business community that are entrenched in this belief. Unless we actually study the population, I don't know that any of us knows for sure. But if anyone who has history in Boston, in Boston, that's my hometown, in Burlington, can remember the Pyramid Mall and the fear in Burlington around that in the 90s, and that's when they built the Lakeview Garage. That was the solution. Let's build another garage downtown and bring Macy's to keep people here. I'm going to put an idea out there that I have, and I'd love to hear anybody's feedback on it. If people are coming to Burlington only because the parking is convenient, we are missing what we are really marketing. This city is much, much more than free parking. 20 years ago, it might have been a different story, but we have created an incredibly vibrant downtown, and there's so much we can do to make it more vibrant. One, I think, of the key is development of the side streets. I think one of the reasons I was so supportive of the mall project is opening that street grid. But I think we need to start thinking that people are coming down here for an amazing experience. And at a certain level, they're willing to tolerate less convenience than they may experience out at Taft's Corners because the experience is that much better.
Okay. You want to comment on that from somewhere? Anybody else?
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that. It's just we're talking about transportation, but transportation is just a service, right? None of us get up in the day to drive or bike. We're going someplace to do something. And so, to me, the fundamental issue in our community is really about that placemaking and making great places. And that's what all of our towns, and including Burlington, are talking about, how to make Burlington a better place. How to make, South Burlington's trying to create a city center. Why are they doing that? Because they know how important people desire to go to great places. And so that's really the fundamental issue, is that we should be focused on how to create great places. Transportation is a part of that. It's not a solution and the end in and of itself. So I guess I just want to put that larger context here. And the bus system, the transit system, the bike routes, the paths, they work because they're connecting places that people want to go to and from. So it's about placemaking.
All right, we'll take the one question before we go to Group D. Can you yell it out there, sir?
Yeah, Chad, I just want to push back a little bit on this one. I think that transportation can actually be a means for adventure. So rather than it just being a service, you can actually make it a feature of your day. If you're on a project that's so fun, you have your kids in the back, you're pulling your Christmas tree with that. So it can be a means of adventure.
Yeah, so that's Ross Saxton. He's with Local Motion, and he's, for those who couldn't hear him, also think about transportation as a means of adventure. And I would say, that's probably a big part of why I think our bike path and the renewal of our bike path is so critical, because people actually, when they go on vacation, they seek out that amenity as part of them having fun.
Sometimes it is an adventure at 5 o'clock trying to get up Main Street. Yeah. Sorry. Group D. All right, beliefs. Lack of complete streets infrastructure makes active mobility seem inaccessible and unsafe. Autonomous vehicles could help groups like the elderly that currently lack mobility. Rise in autonomous vehicles must meet, I guess, with infrastructure improvements, physical and technological. Yikes. Who wants that? Kelly, you go jump in.
I'm going to have Jeff speak to the infrastructure piece. You willing to do that?
Sure, and I'm looking at the solutions line on the bottom about leveraging public and private and nonprofit involvement. This group of us here in this room today have the ability to make these changes happen. Every organization that's here, every business, every nonprofit, the academic institutions that are here, has a chance to participate in making this change happen. And I think probably the biggest challenge for Burlington to overcome going forward is that involvement. The ideas are there. People have really good sense of where we need to get to. It's the effort that it's going to take to make it happen. And so I really urge you everyone here, to think about what can my company do? How can we participate? How can we benefit from this? How do we become the leaders that help make this happen in our community? To put that in scale, when you look at, say, federal transportation policy, the fact that the United States right now does not have a federal transportation program at this point. First time in my life that the Highway Trust Fund is basically bankrupt. Years of money that we've been able to make these kinds of projects happen, whether it's been local projects here in Burlington or larger projects around the country. That needs to change. In New York State, where I live, we're working now on the largest bike and pedestrian project I've ever seen, $200 million Empire State Trail to connect entirely across the state, to give every community a path like the one that's here, Buffalo to Albany, New York City to Montreal. That is being funded 100% with New York State money, because there is no ability to tap into that larger resource that used to be there. We're going to see that money again. Public sector will come back around. We will see that happen. Be ready for that opportunity by having the private sector, your local bonds that you're working on, the nonprofit and other organizations that are here, all working together, and the resources will find the good projects. It happens every time.
I don't know whether Charlie wants to, but you want to talk about lack of complete streets and infrastructure making active mobility seem inaccessible and unsafe?
I'll just touch on it. I mean, obviously we need to complete out that infrastructure, the bike and ped plans that we're talking about. I actually want to talk more about the technology change that's coming. Right, we're at the beginning of that technology change. I know we feel like we've been in the information age for years now. But did the iPhone turn 10? I don't know, 20, I forget now. This is what happens when you start to get old. But you know, I've been really struck just recently in the last maybe 2 years, the conversations that are going on in the transportation profession about the change that's coming from technology is just, it's going up a curve like this. So much so that it's being compared in those conversations. I heard one gentleman a few years older than me talk about this. We're talking about the difference, the same type of change in our communities that happen going from horse and buggy to car. We're talking about going from cars to what happens in this new technology, autonomous vehicles, and everything that comes with it. And there's going to be a lot of changes that happen. Mobility as a service, where Uber and Lyft are at the front of that. It's going to keep changing. Think about if you didn't actually have to pay attention when you drove your car. What would you do with that time? Would you move?
Is that happening right now?
Well, apparently only on Main Street when you're stuck. But and you can go in a good direction with that. Maybe you get useful time out of that. You could go in some negative direction. Now you can live 4 hours away and spend 4 hours doing Netflix on your way in. Yeah, broadband will be certainly better. But there's a lot of change coming, and I guess I don't know the answers to how we all respond to that change. Certainly nobody in 1920 envisioned the interstate highway system. And I think we're at one of those times now where we don't know how this technology change is going to impact us totally. But I think let's keep focused on making great places. and let's watch how this technology evolves.
Why don't we use the last 2 to 3 minutes? Anybody got a burning question they need to ask one of our panelists? Somebody? Anybody? There you go. Direct it to who you'd like to direct it to.
I just want to ask about the tobacco analogy that you raised, because I think that it was public policy that really went the curve of tobacco use, restrictions on smoking, higher prices on smoking, and I want to ask you, from a public policy point of view, what are the 1 or 2 things if you really want to bend the curve? Yes, without making biking and walking more accessible, easier, and safer. But what do you want to do if you really want to bend the curve and help people use these other options, using your tobacco now?
If people didn't hear that, what are the 1 or 2 things to bend the curve to make people use some of these options? That was pretty much what he wanted.
To provide the policy support to make that happen. Well, I think the number 1 thing, and it is yet to happen, is in our next federal transportation bill that complete streets become an absolute requirement. That it is the way we do business, and every street that we build, every project we build with public infrastructure funds accommodates all modes. So that is what we do. So if I could write 1 piece of code, that's it.
All right. Anybody else want to chime in on that? Kelly?
No, we'll take another
One more
question if
question?
anyone has one.
Anybody got another question out there? No brave souls?
So I would just say, I don't want to skip over autonomous vehicles, help groups like the elderly. We are all going to have to explore what this new mode of transportation looks like and how it fits into our community. It's going to come at some point. We just don't know when, but I think it's an important point to not miss that when people become mobility challenged for a variety of reasons at a variety of ages, this kind of service could be a game changer for folks that right now, not only do they have a hard time getting around, but it's also, in some ways the community underwrites that cost to aid them with that mobility. So I think it's important to keep those folks in mind as we think about the future and how it's shaped.
Well, go ahead, Jeff.
We are a conversation we had working on the Boston 2030 transport plan, the mobility plan last year. Boston defines itself as America's walking city. And we got into this conversation. That, to me, was the number 1 thing that Boston needed to be able to say, even though we're looking at all this other technology. Will that technology help make Boston continue to be America's walking city? If it does, it's a technology we want to use. We should embrace it and make it work. But if it doesn't, and it leads us in that opposite direction or in the law of unintended consequences, be really careful about new technologies. We've seen this happen so many times in our society about the things that we think are going to change all our problems for us. It's going to still take an effort. It's about making Burlington a great city, about this being a great community, and then having technology be part of that.
Okay, with that said, Kelly's got some closing remarks. On behalf of the Burlington Business Association, thank you to Jim Barr and Charlie Baker and Jeff Olson for being part of this morning, and thank all of you for coming out for the 15th annual, hard to believe, Burlington Business Association Summit and our host, VEIC. I honestly had never seen this building before. It's spectacular, and the view is even better. So don't forget, Channel 17 CCTV has recorded this, and it will be played back, so you can check with the gentleman there as to when that might happen. And according to Jeff, if you intend to go to Citizen Cider tonight, you have to walk 4.2 miles to have a cider.
That gives you 2 ciders.
2 ciders. Kelly Devine.
First, a round of applause for our panelists. So as I often say at the end of this event, we couldn't do nearly half of what we do without the help of great partners and volunteers. So I want to make sure I say a great big thank you to the members of our board who are here, our sponsor events that working together and with Jeff to set this program up. I know we had Kathy and Megan come in early this morning. I don't know if they're still here helping with registration. Everybody chips into the BBA, and that's what makes all this stuff possible. If you want to continue the conversation and spend more time with Jeff, we were so excited to have him come and hear from him that we created a community event tonight where we've invited the larger community of Burlington to come to Citizen Cider. We're hoping more folks show up, and it's going to be a less formal setup. You'll hear from Jeff. We'll also get to hear from Hans van Wies, who is the general manager of Hotel Vermont. If people don't know, they're doing a lot to offer more transportation, biking transportation for their guests and tourism. And he also comes from a background where there's in Europe, where there's a lot of walking and biking. He'll talk about that. And Chris Lyon, who's here somewhere, who, 7th generation, is really leading the effort from an employer standpoint on how you help your employees break down some of those barriers. Because one thing he may tell you tonight is, and we didn't really talk about today, when you want to if you want to provide parking for every one of your employees and you have a business in Burlington, it's very expensive. It's very expensive over time, and all the companies that I talk to that are situated here remark on that. I want to, of course, thank our amazing MC, Dan Duvernay. Round of applause for Dan. And where is she? Sarah O'Donnell and Jack Como, our staff members. Sarah did all the work to put this together. I'm not taking any of the credit. I want to also mention that our next event is our BBA annual dinner. For those of you who like to attend that event, it's on April 5th in the evening. We open for sponsorships. We'll be opening up registration shortly. We're looking for nominations for our 3 awards: Business of the Year, Business Person of the Year, and our Architectural Award. So keep all that in mind. Thank you so much for all of you that are members and support the BBA. We couldn't do what we do at all without you as well. Thanks, and have a great day.